Hi, everyone. I'm Andrew Kraft. I want to thank you for being with us on this Friday before Christmas. Hope you're getting a good start to your holiday weekend. But we got a lot to cover. We got a lot of stories to tell, and mostly they revolve around Capitol Hill, this building right here. Well, lawmakers are going to get to go home for the Christmas holiday after they passed, with just hours to spare, this new spending bill that funds the government for the next couple of months, I believe, until mid-March. But I want to let you listen in. This is how Speaker of the House Mike Johnson reacted after the vote was cast in his favor, though he did lose some Republican support. 34 Republicans voting against this, though all Democrats voting for it. Some would argue bailing out Speaker Johnson and House Republicans to get the government funded for the next 3 months here. This is what Speaker Johnson said right after the vote. Let's listen.
With overwhelming majority of votes, we passed the American Relief Act of 2025. This is a very important piece of legislation. It funds the government, of course, until March of 2025. That was a big priority for us. This is America First legislation because it allows us to be set up to deliver for the American people. In January, we will make a sea change in Washington. President Trump will return to D.C. and to the White House, and we will have Republican control of the Senate and the House. Things are going to be very different around here. This was a necessary step to bridge the gap, to put us into that moment where we can put our fingerprints on the final decisions on spending for 2025. We also, in this bill, as you know, took care of Americans who desperately needed and deserved the assistance. We had a record hurricane season. Hurricanes Helene and Milton in particular did dramatic damage across at least 6 states, the Carolinas, Virginia, from Florida, Tennessee, all the way through. And they have been waiting for the federal government to assist. We did that tonight in this bill. We also took care of our farmers, many of whom are on the brink of collapse because of Bidenomics, frankly, because the inflationary cost of their inputs and the inability they have right now to get loans from the banks and the lenders to put their crops in the ground, to put the seeds in the ground in the spring. So we had to take care of that, and we did. We are excited about this outcome tonight. We're grateful that everyone stood together to do the right thing. And having gotten this done now as the last order of business for the year, we are set up for a big and important new start in January. We can't wait to get to that point. We encourage swift passage in the Senate now. They need to do their job as the House just did. We will all go home. I want to wish everybody a Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Holidays, and a Happy New Year, because I hope not to see you until we get back after that. I was in constant contact with President Trump throughout this process, spoke with him most recently about 45 minutes ago. He knew exactly what we were doing and why, and this is a good outcome for the country. I think he certainly is happy about this outcome as well. Elon Musk and I talked within about an hour ago. And we talked about the extraordinary challenges of this job. And I said, hey, you want to be Speaker of the House? I don't know. He said, this may be the hardest job in the world. I think it is. But we're going to get through this. We are going to unify this country, and we are going to bring the America First agenda to the people beginning in January. We cannot wait to get started. I hope you all have a great holiday.
Do you still want to be Speaker, Mr. Johnson? How will this be different?
Merry Christmas, Mr. Speaker.
All right, Speaker Johnson there saying that he spoke with President-elect Trump every step of the way. He also spoke with Elon Musk about this in the run-up to the vote here. Let's go out now live to Capitol Hill. That's where we find Fox News correspondent, our friend there, Rebecca Castor. She joins me. And Rebecca, good to see you here. They did this just in the nick of time. Earlier this morning, Rebecca, was this a surety? I mean, was this going to happen? Was this going to be a done deal or not?
I think people were optimistic that Republicans were going to be able to pull this off. I mean, we've seen them do this several times over the last 2 years. These final hour deals reached in the final hours before a government shutdown happened. So even though the Senate still needs to vote, it's safe to say this nightmare before Christmas will be avoided. You heard from House Speaker Mike Johnson there what this new spending bill included. He got it passed with a lot of support from Democrats. That's something that got the former House Speaker, Kevin Kevin McCarthy booted from his position 2 years ago. So things have certainly changed here on Capitol Hill. But, you know, this new bill, it keeps the government funded at current levels through March, includes that aid for hurricane victims and farmers. And essentially, it's the same bill that failed in the House last night. But this one did not include a raise to the nation's debt limit. That was a last-minute request from President-elect Donald Trump, but it was a sticking point for too many Republicans. So GOP leadership put that on the back burner for now. But as you heard, House Speaker Mike Johnson said that he was in constant contact with Trump today throughout these negotiations and says he was on board with this new plan. So again, it still needs to go to the Senate. It's not clear if they're going to vote before the midnight deadline or wait until tomorrow. But either way, we're not expecting to see any effects from this government shutdown, Andrew.
Yeah, and that's always nice to see government shutdowns present a whole host of problems here. But Rebecca, I have to ask, the first iteration of this was more than 1,500 pages. What was just passed there a couple of hours ago was about 120 pages. So presumably a lot was left out, right?
Right. One of those major things that was left out was the original 1,500-page-long bill included a raise for Congress. It also included some other things that, you know, just don't matter to constituents across the country. There was funding in there for a new stadium in Washington, D.C., and there were some other things as well thrown in there, funding for the new bridge in Baltimore. So there were just a lot of add-ons and something, you know, that's typical for the holiday season, the final bill of the year. Right. People kind of call it a Christmas tree bill to add in all these extra stuff at the end of the year, but they're typically things that people want, and there were just too many add-ons that really turned a lot of Republicans off, and you had Elon Musk call them out on X. So that's something that I think we're going to see a lot from this new DOGE caucus over the next administration.
Yeah, Rebecca Castor there live for us in Washington. Rebecca, as always, thanks so much. If we don't see you or hear your reports, have a nice Christmas.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
Okay, take care.
All right, in the meantime here, we do have this shot we just got up there. It looks like some lawmakers might be taking the podium there on the Senate side. You see that sign there. It says 235 well-qualified and historic judicial nominees confirmed by Senate Democrats. Well, we are hearing that the Senate just confirmed Biden's 235th federal judge. Now he surpasses the number of federal judges confirmed from the first Trump administration here. So any president's role and kind of footprint on the federal judiciary is a mark of their time in the White House. And so when we do hear from some of these senators kind of lauding that, touting that, we'll make sure to bring that to you live. Let's continue to tell this story. We did hear from House Democratic leaders after the vote as well, led by Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries. This is brief. Let's listen.
Tornadoes, wildfires, floods, and other extreme weather events can get the assistance that they need to address the problems they've been confronting. House Democrats have successfully stopped extreme MAGA Republicans from shutting down the government, crashing the economy, and hurting working-class Americans all across the land. House Democrats have successfully stopped the Billionaire Boys Club, which wanted a $4 trillion blank check, by suspending the debt ceiling in order to enable them to cut Social Security, cut Medicare, and cut nutritional assistance while providing massive tax breaks for the wealthy, the well-off, and the well-connected. This is a victory for the American people. We have successfully advanced the needs of everyday Americans, but there are still things to be worked on, and we look forward to that fight in the new year. Happy holidays.
Would you support eliminating the debt ceiling next year, sir?
Are you going to negotiate with President-elect Trump directly, sir?
All right, that was the House Minority Leader, the Democrat from New York, Hakeem Jeffries there. Now out live to the White House. Just want to get you all angles of this story. We have the statement in from Karine Jean-Pierre, the White House press secretary. She says this: a government shutdown heading into the holidays would mean service members and air traffic controllers go to work without pay. Essential government services for hardworking Americans would be paused, and economic disruption would occur. Following an order by President-elect Trump, yesterday Republicans walked away from a bipartisan deal and threatened to shut down the government at the 11th hour in order to pave the way to provide tax breaks for billionaires. This revised legislation does not do that. She goes on to say, while it does not include everything we sought, it includes disaster relief that the president requested for the communities recovering from the storm, eliminates the accelerated pathway to a tax cut for billionaires, and would ensure that the government can continue to operate at full capacity. President Biden supports moving this legislation forward and ensuring that the vital services the government provides for hardworking Americans, from issuing Social Security checks to processing benefits for veterans, can continue, as well as to grant assistance for communities that were impacted by devastating hurricanes. So, a statement in from the White House there saying President Biden approves of this and was in favor of this. Let's talk about all of this and more with our friend there at Public-Private Strategies, Rhett Buttle. He joins us. And Rhett, good to see you here. Let's focus on the White House angle of all of this. A lot of Republican critics of the Biden-Harris administration, Rhett, have said, where was President Biden during all of this? Is that a valid question to ask?
Well, look, I think the White House staff was obviously keeping the president in the loop and was very engaged in the negotiations. A lot of times what we see during a long retracted negotiation is that, the folks save the president for the very end, right? Like when the president needs to come in. But I also think we're in this interesting moment, right? President Trump has been elected, and we're in this weird transition of power. And so, a lot of this kind of did rest with the Republican Party and what the Republican Party was going to choose to do so. And I think we saw both, the president and Democratic leaders step back and say, this is the Republican Party's infighting. This is their mess to fix within their own party.
And Reddy, you just reminded me, today, we are 1 month away from Inauguration Day, so I just wanted to put that into perspective as well. Let's talk, though, Red, about House Democrats here. Yesterday, when the second version of this continuing resolution was put to the floor for a vote, almost all House Democrats did not vote for that iteration. I believe only 2 did. But today, in that version, all House Democrats who were present voted in favor of this. Why the change?
Well, look, I think the first thing to remember is that there was a bill on the floor that was actually done, that was a bipartisan compromise, right? And so I think everyone on the Democratic aisle would have preferred that bipartisan compromise that Speaker Johnson was a part of. He worked with Leader Jeffries. The White House was ready to sign the bill. And this was all thrown into chaos, right, by Elon Musk, someone who's not elected, right, and has a lot of sway, obviously, over the Trump administration, the incoming Trump administration. So that's been really interesting. And then I think what you saw is, the Democrats came back and said, no, we're not going to vote for a bill that, strips a lot of important priorities that care for working class families. And what we've seen in this last bill is really a pared down bill. It keeps the government funded. It's got some very important things around disaster funding, for example. But for the most part, it continues kind of the standard operation of where we currently were. And so it made it easy. But what's interesting is that more Democrats actually voted for this bill that a Republican speaker brought forward. And so I think this has put, Leader Jeffries in a really strategic position come the next few months.
Okay, yeah, that's also kind of interesting, too, because this latest version, this was not negotiated with Democrats at all here. So you can't really use the bipartisan moniker, but it was bipartisan in the very evidence of how members voted. So I thought that was interesting. You're talking about winners and losers today. You just said Hakeem Jeffries is in a strategic advantage here. To who? And why did you say that?
Yeah, look, I mean, it's very clear the last few really difficult, bills that have needed to be passed, whether it's on the debt ceiling or getting the budget through. Quite frankly, Hakeem Jeffries has been able to keep his caucus together, right? And so when the Democrats have needed to say no, he's been able to stop things from moving forward. And when Speaker Johnson has not been able to get his caucus together, right, Hakeem Jeffries has been able to keep the government kind of moving forward. And so, Democrats in this case have been a little bit more on the side of reasonable governing and keeping the government open and things like that. I think what we're just seeing is we're seeing such a wide disarray of the Republican caucus, right? Everything from the Freedom Caucus to newly minted members. And all of that is making it really difficult for the speaker to find common ground amongst his own party. And then I think when you add President-elect Trump into the mix, it makes it even more difficult. And I think that chaos is a little bit about what we saw today. And I'm a little worried that we might see that chaos for the next 2 years.
So what about Speaker Johnson and President-elect Trump? Do they come away from all of this with any strategy or strategic advantage?
I'm a little worried it puts the speaker in a bad position to be able to sort of govern going forward. It's a little unclear about where he stands with the president and some of the president's, team. Obviously, the speaker has to be reelected, right? And so it's been a difficult 2 years for him. He's been able to bob and weave, but primarily he's been able to do that with Democrats and Democrats' support, right? And so I think that's really good for the country. Like, to me, bipartisan compromise is always a really good thing. But in terms of not being able to hold your party together, that means that there's a lot of challenges there. And in some ways, this is interesting because I would almost say that this is actually the first failure for President Trump, right? Like, he put his thumb on the scale. He tried to get some things in this package. He used the power of his supporters to be able to do so. And quite frankly, where we just ended up, the CR that was just passed that we expect to pass the Senate, it does not include the priorities that Donald Trump wanted.
Okay, so one of those key priorities, if not the most important, to President-elect Trump was extending the debt ceiling limit here. For viewers who might not know what that entails or what that means here, why did President-elect Trump want this dealt with before he swears the oath for a second term here? Why did he not want that political battle playing out while he is president? What's the political advantage there for him?
Well, look, no president wants to be able to say that they have added more debt to the country's balance sheet, right? And so you extend the debt limit, essentially you're taking more debt on as part of the country, or you're allowing more debt to be taken on. And the reality is this has become a very procedural thing, and both Democrats and Republicans have had to do it. And it's one of those unfortunate things with regardless who's in office, the opposing party always makes it more difficult than it really should be. Now, should we be having a conversation about the country's debt, how we're managing it, how we're paying for our bills? Absolutely. But some of these procedural things have really led, unfortunately, to these intense moments where we almost close down the government over these things. And I don't think that those are great pathway forwards. Fortunately or unfortunately, President Trump will have to deal with this when he's president. So it will come up and it will be interesting to see how the conversation is. And to get a lot of his priorities done, he wants to give, as we know, tax cuts primarily focused on, wealthy individuals and corporations. That means that they're going to need to think about how to pay for those sorts of things. And so when you think about how you're going to pay for the tax cuts, you think about the debt limit ratio, all of this becomes an important part of the fiscal conversation surrounding the United States.
Yeah, right, because, you've heard from a lot of, especially House Republicans in the wake of the election on November the 5th, that Donald Trump obviously won that election, and that Republicans need to get on board with what President-elect Trump wants. And when you talk about this provision specifically that he was asking for, this extension of the debt limit, he was saying essentially extend it through 2029, in his entire term in the White House, or just get rid of it altogether. There were some Republicans who did not go along with that. So will we see some independence from the co-equal branch of government?
Well, look, I think there's kind of like two competing things going on, right? So this conversation about whether we can get rid of it altogether is interesting and quite frankly would help politically both Democrats and Republicans. Whether it helps the country fiscally or not is another question. And so, like I said, now the can has been kicked down the road and the president will have to deal with it. And I think that that's an important conversation, that they'll have to tackle and something that will make passing the agenda even harder. Now, for the Republican Party, what's interesting is you have lots of different factions. And, the sort of brand of republicanism, the sort of, MAGA Republican that Trump represents, they haven't been really focused on debt issues. They've been more focused on, passing bills within their priority, regardless of what the cost is. But there's two other factions of the Republican Party, from the Freedom Caucus to the sort of more traditional Republican Party. They are very concerned about the country's debt. And so how you build that coalition on the Republican side to push all of Donald Trump's plans forward are going to be really interesting come January and February.
Yeah, I mean, President-elect Trump put this on Truth Social just this morning, right? He said Congress must get rid of or extend out to perhaps 2029 the ridiculous debt ceiling. Without this, we should never make a deal. Remember, the pressure is on whoever is president. I mean, so presumably there is going to be some debt ceiling limit fight in the near term, right? When Trump is president again.
I think, yes, of course. I mean, we're going to have to continue to deal with this issue. I think the question is, do Democrats come to the table and work with President Trump in a bipartisan way to say, let's remove this political barrier so that we don't have to deal with it when we hold the White House and you don't have to deal with it when you're in the White House? That's the question that's kind of surrounding Washington right now. I think it's too early to know whether we'll get to that place. But I think more importantly, the question is going to be, how is President Trump going to deal with this, given all the tax cuts that he wants to put in place? You have to pay for those tax cuts that you want to give primarily to corporations and more wealthy people. And it's expensive. And that brings into question the conversation around sort of the fiscal future of the country.
Right.
And then you talk a bit about the debt, and that just makes it challenging.
For the sake of argument, can we just pose the hypothetical? What if the debt limit was abolished? Economically, what would happen to the financial picture of the U.S. government?
Yeah, look, I'm not an economist, so I mean, we would have to talk to some. I mean, it's more. I'm a political strategist. I mean, the political side is it would really help, both sides of the party. But I do think it would send some interesting economic waves, quite frankly, throughout the world, right? The U.S., currency is the standard bearer for the currency throughout the world. And so for the U.S. to think about how to manage their debt, that would send some interesting signals throughout the market for sure.
All right, Rep Buttle, as always, can't thank you enough. And have a good Christmas, Rep. We'll talk soon.
Great to see you as always, Andrew. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays.
All right, in the meantime here, we do have senators there, Senate Democrats taking to the podium, led by Leader Schumer. Let's go out to that right now.
To be joined by many of my Judiciary Committee colleagues, led by Chair Durbin. Now, I know a lot is happening in the Capitol today and tonight, but we want to mark a historic moment here in the Senate. Today, we confirmed the 235th judge, more than any majority has confirmed in decades. This is historic and will have huge and positive implications for the American people for generations to come. Now, with the nation's newest 235th judge, we've confirmed more judges under President Biden than any administration in this century, more judges than any administration going back decades. And listen to this. 1 out of every 4 active judges on the bench has been appointed by this majority. 1 out of every 4. We have some of the most qualified and historic nominees ever confirmed in a 4-year span. 1 out of every 4 judges on the bench is amazing. I want to thank all the senators who worked hard and supported these nominees. It wasn't easy. Their diligence, their stick-to-itiveness, their unity is what led us to this amazing moment here today. Any one of them, when they didn't show up or wanted to dissent or throw a fly in the ointment, could have stopped progress. But we're all here together and happy and proud. These judges are former civil rights lawyers, consumer protection lawyers, federal prosecutors, voting rights experts, labor lawyers, public defenders, teachers, mentors, scholars. Different than in the past, in every walk of life. In the past, so many of the federal judges came from a rarefied group or two. Lawyers in fancy law firms, prosecutors in fancy offices. Not now. We have people who are from all across America and who resemble America. So we're proud of this milestone, not only because of the number, but because of what it means. It means our bench is now far more balanced in its expertise, experiences, and qualifications. We have judges that fought for worker protections, representing factory workers, grocery store workers, taxi drivers, nurses. We have elevated nominees who represented unions, defended freedom of choice, abuse victims, prosecuted drug trafficking. Some have been teachers, some have been mentors. Our nominees are also groundbreaking for their demographic diversity. 150 of these judges are women, making the bench look a little more like America. That's the most under any president. Or individuals like Dale Ho and Myrna Perez, who I proudly urge President Biden to nominate. These two are among the greatest, both immigration and voting rights lawyers in the country. They're now on the bench. And of course, we confirm not just the first black woman to the highest court in all the land, but also the first public defender to have the title justice, Ketanji Brown Jackson. Now, all of them were confirmed because they were among the very most qualified individuals for the job. I want to thank President Biden for sending us such an impressive group. Vice President Harris, who helped us confirm nominees. And of course, my friend and colleague, Chairman Dick Durbin. Just about every Tuesday at our lunch, he would get up and remind us how important it was to get these judges done. He would importune colleagues, get those applications in, make sure they're qualified, make sure they're good. He was a pleasant, happy, broken record on this issue. So I also want to thank all of my colleagues here. As I said, it's been a great, great team. Our courts are stronger. Our courts are better. They reflect our country. Every American can be proud of what this Judiciary Committee and this Senate has done. Senator Durbin.
Thanks, Chuck. Thanks for the kind words, Chuck. I want to thank my committee members. This is a tough assignment. The rules of the Judiciary Committee make it absolutely essential for every member to be present. If one member was absent, we had to postpone consideration of nominees. So the people behind me and some others who couldn't join us at this moment really made this happen, and at great personal sacrifice. It was a team effort all the way. And I'll also tell you this, the White House was cooperating with us every step of the way. Joe Biden took a special interest in this. Every time I've seen him in the last 4 years, he's always brought up the Judiciary Committee and the judges first and foremost. It's on his mind because it's part of his life experience as well, and he knows the challenge in filling these vacancies. Now, the lead, of course, is the number 235, but I'd like to suggest to you the second paragraph. Over 80% of these judicial nominees were approved on a bipartisan basis, Democrats and Republicans. I agree with everything Chuck has said about the nature of the people who have been appointed to these positions and who will serve on these courts and what they bring to the experience. But it was our job to not only find the best people, and every single one of them was reviewed and found qualified or well qualified by the American Bar Association. In the previous 4 years under President Trump's first term, that was not the case. But it is the case under President Joe Biden. Their qualifications are beyond any question, just what we need on the bench today. I'm going to close by saying that this has been an extraordinary honor to serve in this committee. I think it's one of the busiest committees on Capitol Hill and one of the best. I'm sorry that we're not going to continue in the majority, but as Chuck said, 1 out of every 4 Article III judges in America has been approved by this committee during the last 4 years. I'm proud of the people who will be representing the ideals of our nation and the values of our Constitution on the bench. Next is my colleague, Sheldon Whitehouse from the state of Rhode Island. Sheldon.
Thank you, Dick. I really want to congratulate Chairman Durbin for the diligence and persistence of moving this through our committee. Each of these judges takes time, each of them takes effort, each of them takes review, each of them takes committee preparation, and to move this many is a truly heroic effort. I also want to thank Chuck Schumer, because getting them through committee only gets you half the way. You need to give the floor time to get the votes, and nothing is more precious to a majority leader than floor time. So Chuck dedicating the floor time to this project has really been significant. The last thing that I want to say is that this is a very significant achievement, and it is very good news because it means that in court after court after court, people coming in seeking justice will get a fair and honest judge to hear their case. But that does not mean that we can relax our vigilance. Because if you have a billionaire-picked MAGA district judge in a Republican billionaire-controlled circuit feeding to a captured Supreme Court, then all you need is judge shopping to run that MAGA pipeline. Even the Judicial Conference has pushed back against the judge shopping into these MAGA pipelines, but we need to keep a very careful eye on the MAGA pipelines because that is where the special interests will go to get the decisions they know these just judges will give them. And with that, let me turn it over to my terrific colleague from Minnesota, Amy Klobuchar.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sheldon. Thank you to our leader, Senator Schumer, and someone who was on the Judiciary Committee way back. And
From 1981 to 2015, I was on the Judiciary
There you
Committee,
go.
House and Senate.
Took us a long time to recover.
I still haven't.
anyway, but understands how important this is and how tough it is to get all these judges confirmed, nominated, confirmed, vetted, all of that, and gave us the time to do that. Senator Durbin with his tremendous leadership. Happy holidays, everyone, by the way. I'm sure, I guess I have my vote for the best holiday suit coat back there in the second row. He's looking at it. That's you. Yeah, really nice. Look at those on the side. It's subtle, but kind of not subtle.
Amy Klobuchar, Judiciary Committee fashion critic.
That's exactly. But I know you've all just waited to spend your Friday evening with all of us. And so this is great. But this is truly a moment. It is not just the number of 235, which is kind of incredible given everything we were facing the last 2 years. But it's the quality of these judges. And as my colleagues mentioned, it's important that we have people from different backgrounds that become judges, just like the people from this country don't fit into one mold. I personally, from the state of Minnesota, we have gotten a number of judges through. Now, 2 of them were prosecutors, and they were very, very good. Jeff Bryan and Laura Provenzino, Kate Menendez, a public defender. And we've also had federal magistrates, like the 2 that were confirmed from California. And it was just a broad background that I think were really important to the president, really important to us. You know, we are going to take an oath, those of us that just got elected again, that our colleagues have all taken to support and defend the Constitution of the United States. I think we're going to be called on to respect that oath many times next year. But one of the ways we show that we care about that oath is by making sure that we get qualified judges on the bench. That is part of our system of government. And while we can't control what they do, I think we all know that quite well, knowing that we're putting someone in and day out is going to look at the cases before them and make good decisions is a big part of fulfilling our oath. So thank you very much, and I am proud to be part of this group up here. Thanks.
All right, Senate Democrats led by Leader Schumer and other Democrats on the Senate Judiciary Committee touting this milestone that was just surpassed on securing 235 judicial confirmations there. Live picture outside the U.S. Capitol. We also have a live picture there at the White House. President Biden is weighing in on this milestone. As you know, whoever is in power, whatever president is in power, the number of judicial nominees and confirmations matters to their legacy. The federal judiciary complexion and makeup is important to that legacy. So much so, President Biden saying today, we reached a major milestone in our efforts to protect our nation's freedoms. The United States Senate confirmed the 235th federal judge during my presidency, marking the largest number of confirmations in a single term since the 1980s. This includes 1 Supreme Court justice, 45 circuit court judges, 187 district court judges, and 2 judges on the Court of International Trade. He says these men and women represent the best of America. They are all highly qualified, and they have had distinguished legal, judicial, and academic careers here. So we got to slide away for a quick commercial break. Don't you worry, so much still happening on Capitol Hill. Remember, the Senate does now have the continuing resolution to fund the government through mid-year next year, but we don't know yet when they will vote on this, but they do have it. Live picture on the Senate floor. When we come back, we'll be going out to Capitol Hill yet again for so much more. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft, and thanks for being with us here on this Friday night. Hope you're getting a good start to your holiday week here. We're going back, though, to Capitol Hill. Remember, we're waiting for the Senate to take up what was just passed in the House in order to avoid that government shutdown. In the meantime here, let's bring into the conversation our friend there at Politico who knows all things about Capitol Hill. That's Anthony Adragna, of course. He joins me. Anthony, good to see you here. I just want to say good thing that you get to not be on Capitol Hill for the holidays now that the shutdown has been averted here. So you must be breathing a sigh of relief, but this isn't a done deal yet. Do we know when the Senate's going to vote on this?
That's what we're all waiting for. As you are well aware, and listeners probably are as well aware as well, these things tend to take a while to process when they're sent over from the House. That being said, we are expecting them to vote later this evening. We're being told they're trying to come up with a time agreement to consider some amendments to this, as well as a separate piece of legislation on Social Security. But once those are worked out, I'd expect them to probably vote quicker than most people are used to the Senate voting. And they're looking to get out of town as quickly as they can. So, but some major business to tend to before that.
All right, Anthony, this is a tall order, but if you could, in layman's terms and as abridged as possible, walk us back and take us back to how this week went on the House side. You had so many stakeholders, President-elect Trump, Vice President-elect Vance, and then some unusual stakeholders as well, some unelected stakeholders with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy here. I just have some tweets from Musk. This is what he said this morning about the new iteration of the continuing resolution. He said, so is this a Republican bill or a Democrat bill? But then he got on board and he tweeted this: the speaker did a good job here. Given the circumstances, it went from a bill that weighed pounds to a bill that weighed ounces. The ball should now be in the Democrat court. So that was kind of an interesting supporting character in all this, so to speak, right?
Something we heard from a lot of rank and file lawmakers today is how unproductive they found Mr. Musk weighing in, seemingly at random points, honestly, and scuttling a lot of work that had gone into various proposals about how to structure this government funding agreement. Conservatives are pretty much opposed to all sorts of these funding patches. So Mike Johnson was going to lose a bunch of them to begin with. There were then various iterations of trying to extend it for a shorter period of time with certain things attached to it, without certain things attached to it. And then you had Musk, Trump, others weighing in at various points. And so members were reacting to a lot of those outside pressure campaigns, but it made it really hard for the speaker, I think, to lock down the caucus and figure out where things were. That caused several days of sort of these fits and spurts of seeming like we were on track to get something passed, then not. And finally, yeah, as you said today, it's all sort of came together pretty quickly in the end. And Musk, at the end of the day, was supportive of what Johnson did. So that's where we are.
Yeah, I mean, Anthony, the word unprecedented is used a lot in our business, in our industry here. But for a Speaker of the House to be actively negotiating with someone like Musk, Democrats call him an unelected billionaire. I mean, that's new, isn't it?
It's certainly not anything that I've seen. And yeah, you're absolutely right. We've heard a lot of Democrats throughout the week, but especially today, bemoaning President Musk being able to scuttle deals like this. Musk is not an expert in the legislative process here in Washington, which is complex and arcane, even for those of us that have been covering it for a long time. So I think people really found a lot of those invectives that came seemingly at various random points in the process particularly unhelpful from somebody who is relatively new to the functioning of Washington.
Yeah, so live picture there. So I guess I have to ask you, this latest version that did pass overwhelmingly, every Democrat supported it. Why was that not the case yesterday? Only 2 Democrats supported it. What was the difference? What was the discrepancy that made the difference?
Well, Democrats certainly felt like the bill that was trotted out what feels like 10 weeks ago, but was just earlier this week, was a carefully constructed, bipartisan, bicameral negotiated agreement. And what has since passed has been slimmed down quite a bit. It's about 130 pages. The original negotiated deal was closer to 1,600 pages. And there were a lot of Democratic priorities in there that got left on the cutting room floor. Things as big as additional funding for cancer research, and things as small, seemingly, as a stadium deal here that's important in Washington, D.C. So people really feel like things got taken out at the last minute. They didn't like how Trump and Musk were weighing in, seemingly at the last minute, and scuttling a lot of the hard-fought negotiated compromise. So I think that explains it today. But at this point, they were sort of willing to get behind anything that could get passed, keep the government open, but also get them out of town.
Yeah, so I thought that was so interesting, too, because it's always been described at this time of year, because we've been in this position so many times. You've probably covered looming government shutdowns by the tens, if not hundreds here, Anthony. But what is so interesting is that people describe them as you just throw what you want in this kind of minibus or omnibus bill that you weren't able to get passed throughout the course of the year. Is that true?
It's certainly what conservatives were very concerned about with this process. They didn't want this to become, they derided the negotiated compromise as a Christmas tree bill, so a little bit of something for everybody. So that's part of what scuttled that initial proposal really within 24 hours of it being tossed out. This version here definitely doesn't have as many of those additional add-ons, although it does have certain things like disaster aid, relief for farmers, things of that sort, really important things. But certainly not as big and expansive as that initial negotiated compromise was, and that drew the outrage from a lot of conservatives.
Yeah, I mean, you heard there from President-elect Trump on Truth Social all day yesterday with some very serious, grave primary threats, not against Democrats, but against members of his own party, Republicans, including one Chip Roy there from Texas. He just put this out. He said, notwithstanding significant progress over the last few days, I voted no on H.R. 10545, the third version of the government funding CR. He says, while it was a marked improvement on the 1,547-page, he calls it a cramnibus that was released earlier this week, it still included $110 billion in supplemental funding with no offsets or pay-fors, which I cannot support there. So Chip Roy staying to his kind of fiscal hawk status here, but have you heard from some of these Republican members on the Hill? How are they taking these primary threats by Trump? Seriously or not?
Yeah, it's obviously something that we've seen throughout his time in public life. I think, we were able to connect with Chip Roy after that thread, and he basically said, he's not overly concerned by it. He thinks he can survive it. I think other members, maybe less publicly, are certainly concerned about that. They fear the president's network. They fear his influence. They fear his network of supporters. And so there certainly is an intent on not crossing him just for the point of crossing him. And so I think we're going to have to wait and see just how serious a lot of these threats are. Notably, the president-elect wasn't tweeting about primary threats or Truth Socialing about primary threats today. So I think we'll have to wait and see. But certainly this slimmed down version of the bill is more to his liking. And although we're told also that he's not happy that it didn't address the debt ceiling.
Right.
So as with this process, if everybody's kind of unhappy, then it probably means it's a decent agreement. So
okay, because we just put up the Republicans, 34 of them, their names, who voted against it. So I was just kind of curious whether or not they would be open to a primary threat, because they did buck what Trump and Vance wanted, essentially. I know this version did not have anything related to the debt ceiling, but still they went against it.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I saw the list, but I hadn't processed it before. It's an interesting sort of mix of folks, most of whom appear to be in very, very safe seats, some of whom are retiring. So yeah, I think it's going to end up being a mix, but certainly people are taking primary threats seriously. We've seen a number of members who've lost races, so we'll have to wait and see.
All right, Anthony Adragna there on Capitol Hill. Anthony, thanks so much. We hope you have a Merry Christmas. And now we watch for the Senate to vote on it.
Same to you, and thanks.
Thank you. All right, in the meantime here, let's take a quick commercial break. So we did hear from Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer. He took a few questions. The Senate's still in session right now. Remember, they have to vote on that continuing resolution, and we'll wait for them to do it. When they do it, we'll take it live. Let's take that break. We'll see you in just a moment. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft as we near the top of the hour. Let's focus a little bit more, though, on Capitol Hill. So a lot of watchers and insiders there in Congress, well, they're going to call the next Congress a DOGE-inspired Congress. We've been talking about Elon Musk's influence on lawmakers throughout this entire government funding process here. And Fox's Lucas Tomlinson has a look at what that may be in the next Congress. Let's listen.
Of Government Efficiency's ex-bio reads, the people voted for major reform. New Fox polling out today shows exactly that. Only 19% of Republicans say 2024 was a good year for the country. That's compared to 42% of Democrats. DOGE leaders Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy are already working with congressional partners on ideas for change. In the Senate, DOGE caucus leader Republican Joni Ernst wants federal employees to return to the office 100% of the time. In her new bill, Ernst wants to relocate 30% of federal workers outside the D.C. metro area. She says, quote, we can give taxpayers an extra Christmas gift by selling off unused and expensive office buildings, which she says will save the American taxpayer over $1 billion. Ernst says 4 years after federal buildings closed in the nation's capital during COVID, today, no government agency is even using half its office space. House Speaker Mike Johnson says he's on board with reining in spending.
We are committed to cutting hundreds of billions of dollars of wasteful spending out of the federal budget. That's what we're going to do, the DOGE effort with Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy.
The challenge to cutting spending, 70% of it is mandatory, and President-elect Trump doesn't want that touched. That means changes to Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security are off the table for now. The other roughly 30% is discretionary spending. So what Musk and Ramaswamy are trying to do is cut roughly $2 trillion from that smaller portion of the budget, a very tall order. In Washington, Lucas Tomlinson, Fox News.
Lucas, thanks so much. All right, we're staying on Capitol Hill. We're about to go out live to the Senate floor. Senators are talking right now, but while we were speaking with Anthony Adragna there at Politico about all of these negotiations and machinations, well, we missed this. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer took a few questions from the press after this press conference. Let's watch this.
Bill, do you expect to pass both of them before you leave tonight?
We are trying very hard to do that. I just filed cloture on the second bill already, the Social Security bill. There are a number of amendments that members have asked for. You know that amendments can draw out the process, but usually in these hours we come to an agreement on them, and that's what we're working to do. Yes.
Senator Schumer, what's your outlook for the debt limit next year? Do you agree with those in the House who say Democrats should only engage if Trump agrees to abolish it?
Look, I think that the bottom line is that this would have been a very unfortunate time to add the debt limit to any agreement, any CR, and I'm very glad we didn't. Yes.
Thank you, Leader Schumer.
Oh, now I see. I was wondering, what's so big about a blue suit? I didn't see the sleeves and the, okay.
It's my last day of sessions. But you saw the impact that Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy of DOGE had on the talks for the continuing resolution in the House this year. You know, what are your thoughts
I'm glad that the Republican leadership and the Republican colleagues in the House didn't, were able to tell Elon Musk he was wrong when it comes to debt ceiling. Yes. Last one.
Leader Sherman, can you address some of the things that didn't make it on the bill or were stripped out of it, like the drug reforms,
Look,
the China investment
this was a
provision?
compromise. We got some major things we wanted in the bill, particularly
Disaster.
the disaster relief, which was bigger. President asked for 117. We got 100. We kept the government open, and we didn't get the debt ceiling. So there were three major victories. We didn't get everything we wanted, but I think if you look at the vote in the House, people felt pretty good. It was virtually unanimous. Thank you, everybody.
One more, if you would. Do you think President-elect Trump is taking too much direction from Elon Musk?
I'm not going to comment.
All right, interesting last question there. Of course, that was Senate Majority Leader Schumer saying he's filed cloture on one of the pieces of legislation to avert a government shutdown. Still really no timing, though, on when that vote might take place. Let's go out now to the Senate floor. The Democrat from Oregon, Senator Ron Wyden, speaking. Let's watch.
That was a priority for him. I basically said, that's exactly what we have in mind as Oregonians, what I have in mind as Oregon's senior senator. And I'm very happy to state tonight publicly to the incoming chair of the committee, the senator from Utah, that I intend to work very closely with Congressman Bentz to make this become law. Now, so everybody in Oregon understands, this bill does not become law tonight. But what it does is it sends a message from the United States Senate that when you get people of goodwill and willingness to find common ground, you can make real action happen. And the Oahe legislation that I worked for years with ranchers and hunters and fishing families and environmental folks has now passed the United States Senate. That's something that after decades of debate about the future of the Oahe, nobody thought it was going to happen anytime soon. In fact, yesterday people said, well, we'll have to wait and see what happens. Now the United States Senate has acted, and acted, as I say, to protect the ranching way of life in rural Oregon and our treasures. And I hope that tonight's action will give all parties interested in the protection of the treasures of Oahe and interest in the ranching way of life. It should give folks at home the chance to know that we are going to be in a position to, in 2025, with the leadership of the Senate and the House behind this effort, we're going to be in a position in 2025 to make this important legislation the law of the land, and the protection for the Oahes will be permanent and will be in the text of black letter law for all to see. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
All right, of course, we're going to keep showing you the Senate floor throughout the night periodically, but we are in a new hour. I'm Andrew Kraft. Let's step away from Capitol Hill. I know we spent the last hour going through all of those updates. It was very fast moving, and the government will be funded through at least mid-March. And remember, barring anything happening there in the Senate, but from what we're hearing, senators are expected to pass that. In the meantime here, I'm Andrew Kraft. I want to thank you for being with us on your Friday night on the start to your holiday weekend or week if you have next week off here. But President Biden. And First Lady Jill Biden got into the holiday spirit today, reading to children at one of these children's hospitals in the nation's capital here. Let's listen to the First Lady and President Biden here.
While visions of sugar plums danced in their heads, and Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled down for a long winter's nap, when out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave luster of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eye should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer. With a little old driver so lively and quick, I knew in a moment it must be St. Nick. More rapid than eagles, his coursers they came, and he whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donner and Blitzen, to the top of the porch, to the top of the wall. Now dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle, mount to the sky. So up to the housetop, the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling, I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed in all fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all tarnished with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his sack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard of his chin was as white as the snow. He had a broad face and a round little belly that shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to his work and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk. And laying his finger aside of his nose and giving a nod up the chimney he rose. He sprang to the sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him explain ere he drove out of sight, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Reading and entertainment.
Dr. Biden, thank you for sharing that wonderful story of Was the Night Before Christmas. Stories like this bring so much warmth and joy during this holiday season. We really appreciate your presence here today.
Thank you.
Welcome back to Children's National Hospital. And thank you, Mr. President. We've never had a president join for 4 years in a row straight, so you have set a high bar. Dr. Biden, President Biden, thank you for your service to our country. We are so grateful to both of you.
Thank you.
And thank you for continuing this 75-year tradition at Children's National Hospital. We wish you and your family a very happy holiday season. Thank you.
Can I make a brief statement?
Absolutely.
Folks, this is a tough time of the year, but it's going to get better. We've been here. Christmas time, we've been here as nations as well. And so, keep the hope. These guys are going to take care of everything. You know, the future president, there's a president right there. So anyway, you're in our prayers, you're in our thoughts, and thank you for letting us join you. Yeah.
Happy holidays. Happy holidays, everyone.
All right, they're at Children's National Hospital there in Washington. You have the president and the first lady reading. It was the night before Christmas. 2 children there. President Biden has done this each year of his presidency, and you heard him there. So he's taking photos with some of the patients of the hospital and their families. And back out live there to the White House. I'd be remiss if I didn't say that 1 month from today, President Biden will leave office. 1 month from today until the inauguration. So you see the wreaths there on the White House festive as ever. In the meantime here, I'm Andrew Kraft. We are in a new hour. We do want to take our first commercial break of this hour. When we come back, we're diving into some of these top international headlines today, including developments out of the Middle East, in Syria in particular, and that deadly attack at a Christmas market in Germany. We'll have updates on that for you after the break. And welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andrew Kraft. All right, let's move on now to some of these key international stories, including the developing situation there in Germany. Take a look at this. This is just some of the video from the scene earlier today. And this is what we now know, that a car plowed into a busy outdoor Christmas market in the eastern German city of Magdeburg today, killing at least 2 people and injuring at least 68 others in what authorities suspect was an attack there. You see video from the scene. This is not live. This was captured earlier tonight. Now, the driver of the car was arrested. Now, the interior minister of the state of Saxony-Anhalt told reporters the suspect is a 50-year-old Saudi doctor who first came to Germany in 2006. Now, 15 of the injured were hurt very seriously. That's according to government officials and the city government's website. It said 37 people had injuries of medium severity and 16 were lightly injured. Now, the sounds of sirens from first responders clashed with the market's holiday decorations, including ornaments, stars, and leafy garland festooning the vendors' booths there. You see the injured taken out on stretchers. You see all of the people just walking around shocked and dazed, all the debris on the ground as well, and the law enforcement on scene for this. In the meantime, though, we do want to bring into the conversation our friend there at the Foundation for Defensive Democracies, David Daoud. He joins us with more here. David, good to see you. This is a horrible set of circumstances this close to the Christmas holiday here. In the box you see right there, that is a live picture there in Magdeburg. What are you hearing? What have you heard?
Well, like you said, there's not much information yet. German authorities do suspect. They said there are elements of this attack that seem to suggest that it was a terrorist attack. The identity of the attacker makes things complicated. As you noted, he's a Saudi national who came to Germany in 2006 as an asylum seeker. But he's not a religious man himself. He seems to be, according to Wall Street Journal, an anti-Islam activist, an anti-religious activist, someone who's constantly warning about the dangers of Islamization in Germany. He's expressed support for the AfD. He has talked about the dangers that the kind of the increased religiosity in the Middle East poses to minorities, to women. It's a complicated picture of a man who has complained that German authorities are trying to silence him because um, he's expressed opposition to the Islamic religion rather than someone. I think in 2016 there was a similar attack in Germany by a Tunisian who had different motivations. I think he was a rejected asylum seeker. So it's unclear what motivated this man specifically to attack a Christmas market, given he doesn't have motivations that, or his background doesn't necessarily suggest that he would be inclined to do so.
Yeah, of course, we know that he was apprehended at the scene. We don't know if he is, experiencing any bodily injury from the crash itself, or whether or not he's being treated at a hospital, though he is undergoing questioning right now. That's what we are told. You brought up the 2016 Berlin attack that was very similar in nature. Maybe the motivations were divergent and were quite different here. But this is a method of attack that we have seen all across Europe in the last 10 to 15 years. This, death by van, death by car here. And we're seeing it yet again here, motivations aside, in yet another German city around Christmas time. I just have to know, I mean, the coincidental harm marks should be acknowledged.
Of course. And look, I mean, if you intend to cause harm, there's little that's easier to get your hands on in any place, right, than a car. We see this also in Israel, where people with terrorist motivations or nationalistic motivations, as the Israeli police and security services often like to euphemistically call it, will engage in car ramming attacks. It's a very easy method. You can create mass casualties with the method, and all you need is a driver's license. You don't need to go through the processes that I imagine are more complicated in Germany of, say, obtaining a firearm. You don't need to, if you use a knife, it's something that perhaps if you intend to harm several people, it's not as effective. It's an effective method. It's something that you can get your hands on very easily, unfortunately.
Yeah, and David, I wanted to ask too, because you're talking about the German political situation. I'm not an expert in German politics. But Olaf Scholz's coalition essentially fell apart last week, and there was a vote of no confidence taken, presumably setting up elections sometime in early 2025 here. So he could well be out of his way in the prime minister's office there in Berlin, and so we might see new leadership in Germany. How does that tie into this? I don't want to draw connections or ties if they're not there. Are they?
I mean, hard to say. I imagine some people who have criticized German authorities for not being stringent enough when it comes to bringing in refugees, immigration policy, will use this and run with it and say, well, look, we've been telling you all along, and here's another example of why this government and this line of thinking and kind of the, as it's been called, the neoliberal outlook when it comes to immigration policy has failed. We need to restore security to our streets. We see this current across Europe. I mean, we see this current in France, this anti-immigrant orientation that is fueled by attacks such as this, the 2016 attack in Tunisia, the several attacks that occurred in France that were carried out by people who had expressed loyalty to ISIS. So I think it will dovetail with that, and it will help fuel it.
Yeah, we're just taking some looks at the scene, and these scenes are just so chaotic, and they're so traumatic, and they're so grisly, and we lost our live picture there in Magdeburg, unfortunately. But I wanted to ask, too, when these investigations proceed and when we learn more and more details, potential motivation may come out. I would imagine that's going to be the line of questioning from investigators, about why this individual who's apparently a Saudi national. He's been in Germany since 2006. So he did not just get there, why he did this and what his motivations are. At least 2 individuals are deceased right now. Many, many more are injured. And we're hearing from a lot of German officials, including in Washington, at the German embassy, the foreign minister there, Anna Baerbock, saying the images from Magdeburg shake me to my core. For families and friends who wanted to spend time together at the Christmas market, nothing is as it was. My deepest sympathy goes out to the victims and their families. I thank the first responders. I believe we also have a statement in from Vice President-elect J.D. Vance on this situation. He says, our prayers go to the people affected by this terrible attack on a Christmas market in Germany. What a ghastly attack so close to Christmas. You know, David, well, one of the questions reporters ask investigators, if they knew this individual ahead of time, that's usually, you know, the case in a lot of these unfortunate circumstances that I've covered here. That's the one question. That's the first question. Did law enforcement know who this was before they carried this out?
My understanding is that they did not. Again, as you said, he's been in Germany since 2006, and it seems like he hasn't necessarily posed that kind of a risk. He suggests, or at least posts that he's posted on his social media in recent days, suggests that he was persecuted by German authorities for his opposition, again, to theocracy, to his criticism of Islam. So whether he was on a terror watch list or some kind of watch list for someone who could be suspected of this attack, it doesn't seem, according to reports, that he was.
Okay, David, you know, while we do have you, obviously we want to go to your subject matter expertise, and that, of course, is the Middle East. And I want to focus on Syria, if we can here. I want to put this tweet up. Barak Ravid there at Axios has some reporting out of the U.S. delegation that traveled to Damascus to meet with this rebel leader now in charge, the rebel group HTS. So the U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for Near East Affairs, Barbara Leaf, says that HTS leader, Ahmad al-Shura, or al-Jolani, as he's called, committed in a meeting in Damascus Friday to not allow terror groups to operate in Syria and threaten the U.S. and neighboring countries. Now, I want to show this tweet because this is really important. So Elizabeth Hagedorn there, she covers all of this at the State Department. She said Golani's name already removed from the State Department's rewards for justice site. So it does seem, David, that the $10 million bounty on his head was almost immediately removed after this meeting here. Are there quid pro quos going on? You heard there from Barak Ravid that commitment that was ascertained that, you know, no terrorism will fester in Syria in this vacuum that has now presented itself in the wake of the Assad regime fall here. And then you see the bounty, $10 million off his head. What do you make of that?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, look, the guy's been in power, if you can call it even in power, for 12 days. There's not enough of a kind of a time to judge whether he's been saying a lot of the right things, at least on camera. There's not enough time to judge whether that's a sincere change in his perspective, whether he had, I mean, in some ways, his own vision on the road to Damascus, and he became a different man. I think he's in a situation where he's taken control of a country that has been fractured by 14 years of civil war. He understands that his hold on the country is precarious. The country's stability is precarious. Out of a sense of tactical pragmatism, if nothing else, it would behoove him not to pick fights with, say, more powerful actors in the region. We've seen him send calming feelers to the Israelis. We've also seen something similar with the Iranians. He's talking to the Russians. The Russians seem to say that their mission in Syria has not failed. Now, that could be face-saving. But he has been in talks with the Russians. There have been talks between him and other Western officials, United Kingdom, and as you noted today, our own delegation that was there, to try to have sanctions removed. If you're taking over a country that has been battered by civil war, you don't want to upset the United States. You don't want to upset the West. And so you'll say a lot of things. Now, the rewards for justice being removed, it seems like the underlying logic is no longer there, because I think it's about the information about his presence and whereabouts. We know where he is.
Sure.
But what wasn't discussed there was removal from the FTO list, State Department FTO list, or lifting Syria sanctions. It seems like we are continuing, and I hope we do continue, to take a wait and see approach until we have sufficient evidence of how this individual intends to, say, deal with the upcoming elections that are supposed to happen in March. How, if HTS wins, they will govern. If they lose, will they be gracious in defeat, and will they accept a peaceful transfer of power? So there are a lot of questions, and I think we should be highly skeptical given this man's pedigree. This is a man who he originated out of ISIS and Al Qaeda. Right? This is not your typical. This is not your freedom fighter.
Yeah. So because of those, I guess, terroristic proclivities on al-Jolani's part here, Should U.S. officials there be wary that they're not being sold a false bill of goods?
Absolutely, absolutely. Ronald Reagan's old trust but verify. I would say don't trust and absolutely verify. It's easy, talk is cheap, and it's easy to say yes, I don't want war with Israel. It's easy to say I'm going to control my territory. He also has an interest in consolidating power, right? When we see moves against other armed groups and trying to bring them to consolidate them under either the HTS umbrella or the umbrella of the nascent post-Assad Syrian state. He has an interest in doing that. This isn't. He's not doing this out of a sense of altruism. So that doesn't necessarily indicate that he has changed. We need to see action. Again, we have at least a decade of this man's indicating that this man is a terrorist. There's a reason why he also is designated SDGT. So we need to see at least equivalent action showing that he's repented.
David, just lastly, though, I mean, what about the possibility of a future secular Syrian state here? I mean, has that been talked about at all, or will this have, an Islamic inflection and complexion, depending on whoever runs it?
Look, I think it depends on what you mean. Syria is a traditional society, but even traditional people, right? We're hearing talk out of Syria that they're insisting they want a secular state. There was an Umayyad square in Damascus. There was a protest almost against HTS officials saying, we want, when they started talking in religious terms, we want a secular state. Now, what does that mean? It's going to have to be something that looks something like the Syrian context, maybe not like what we would expect in the West, but what we should want is that this future Syria will not take away rights from women, will not limit the rights of women, will not limit the rights of minorities, that it will deal with citizens as individuals rather than as categories.
All right, David Dawood, thanks for kind of going around the map there on this Friday night, and have a good rest of your weekend. We'll talk soon. All right, David's always a great resource for so much of these world events going on there, especially in the Middle East. Let's take a quick commercial break. A lot more where that came from on this Friday night when we come back.